Hello, everyone. My name is Atinoke Odukoya. I'm the co-founder and executive director of the Center for Women's Health and Information, SEWIN. We're located in Lagos, Nigeria. SEWIN empowers women and girls for equality, health, and rights. Our goal is to ensure that women and girls have their well-being, physical, mental, psychological, medical, all round, catered for. We work with women and girls with disabilities to ensure that they are not left behind, particularly in the field of response, prevention, and response to issues of sexual and gender-based violence. We're located in Lagos, Nigeria.
And hello, my name is Julie Kun, and I'm based in Melbourne, Australia, and I'm coming into today on the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. I am the director and founder of Julie Kun Consulting. We consult around creating social justice with our head, heart, and hands, and that includes having an intersectional approach to matters such as domestic and family violence, and taking a particular interest in people experiencing multiple locations of marginalisation, including disability. And I am a person with disability myself. Lovely to be with you today.
All right. Thank you, Julie. Nice to be with you as well. To begin with, right, could you explain what tech-facilitated abuse looks like for women and girls with disabilities? How do their experiences differ from those that have no disabilities? Yeah.
Well, first of all, I should say that I'm talking about the Australian experience and recognising it could be different in other parts of the world. But women and girls with disability experience all the different forms of tech abuse experienced by women and girls without disabilities. But for them, when they experience tech abuse, they're experiencing isolation because technology could be that one way that they have of communicating. They are experiencing the destruction of the mechanisms that they may use to participate in life. It can look like online mocking and trolling around their disability. It is about exploiting digital dependency. So it is about perpetrators of domestic and family violence, knowing that that technology is their connection to the outside world, it's their connection to decision making, and taking that away. And it's about surveillance. It's about people knowing that if they can track people, if they can monitor what they're doing, that they can control the person through technology. And I have a question for you, Antigua. So building on what I've just been talking about, what does tech-facilitated gender-based violence look like for disabled people in Nigeria and more broadly, the African context?
All right. Thank you, Julie. It's not, I like what you've talked about and how tech-facilitated GBV affects or impacts on women with disabilities, right? I would say that in Nigeria and across other African countries generally, it's not just about the same kind of violence that we face online. It has several things tied to it. It's about intersectionality, gender, disability, and then digital inequality. It's also about technologically meditated issues, but that are socially rooted, right? So women with disabilities already suffer some kinds of what's the word now? Intimidation, right? But then which are socially rooted, and then you build on it the issue of technology, right? And then it's often hidden due to the issues of accessibility or inaccessibility and stigma barriers, right? It comes from different areas. One key thing that also is key or specific to Nigeria, if I may talk or look more in that area, is the fact that we do not take neurodivergence into consideration in this wise. So when we talk about women with disabilities, the more obvious forms of disabilities comes to play, right? But when
Mm.
it comes to neurodivergence, which we're also still learning a lot about, even on the continent, it adds a layer to what TFGBV looks like for women with or women and girls with disabilities. So whilst there are cybercrime laws in existence, whilst we recognize generally gendered and disability specific harms, whilst we try to, and I use the word try to, provide some forms of accessible justice pathways, it's still a tough layer. And I'll explain what it may look like, in an example. So, say, for instance, a caregiver, right, to a neurodivergent young woman or girl, um, monitors and restricts the phone use just to hide certain forms of abuse or deletes evidence of abuse. That's the kind of thing that you might see. Or a woman, young girl with disability being groomed, forced into sharing pictures, being blackmailed. That's what the experience is. That's what they look like normally. Um, having looked at that and how there's this added layer on issues for women and girls with disabilities, when survivors seek help or support, what barriers do you think they might encounter due to accessibility issues?
There are so many barriers, I think, for people with disabilities, and one is not being believed.
Mm,
And that is based on ableist views that they're not that people with disabilities aren't reliable. I think there's also perceptions of people with disabilities being a burden in society or to others. So when they're coming forward and saying, I'm being exploited, it's not seen in the same way as if it was a person without disabilities. And you've also got, we're talking about women and girls here that are often experiencing. So you've got sexism as well, of people not being seen as being worthies of being listened to, of being believed, and of having the resources to take action being used to take action. So I think that is all barriers to help seeking. And also, if services aren't accessible, to how do you then even make a complaint or go to someone who can take action? So if services aren't accessible, if you're not going to be believed, or you've had previous experiences of not being believed, which means you may not try again, that's all going to be barriers to people getting the support that they need. But what I really liked about what you said before is that, you know, we're talking about women with disability,
mm,
but that is such a wide concept, isn't it? It could be
yeah,
someone with mobility issues. It could be, as you said, someone with vision issues. It could
yeah,
be neurodivergence. And even neurodivergence is a whole
it's
category
wide.
in
Yeah.
itself.
Hmm.
So when we're talking about barriers, but when we're talking about accessibility, we're asking the people that are creating and maintaining these platforms and creating these apps and websites to have that all in mind. And if they
Hmm.
don't, if their concept of disability is really narrow, like you were saying in Nigeria, it's a
Mm,
narrow definition, that accessibility is just so much harder.
mm,
And so it in different places around the world where the definition of disability, and I think that's something to keep in mind, that there isn't one definition that is used in different cultures around what is disability. So
mm.
that is also going to make a difference.
Yeah, and aside from keeping that in mind, is also not to forget and just, kind of like streamlined to the forms of disability that are more widely known or more visible to people, right? Okay, so let's look at the next question and talk about turning digital spaces. We talked about where these barriers are. How do platforms and technologies contribute to the exploitation, control, or silencing of disabled users?
That is such a good question, and I think in Australia, 1 in 5 women and girls are a person with disabilities, and
Mm,
yet we're treated as if we're this margin on a margin, and we're not. We're 1/5 of the population, and so when technology is being created, we're
mm,
not centered, so it's not
mm,
accessible. And safety isn't centered. We don't have safety by design. And when you are having to retrofit accessibility and safety, it's not as good, and it's more expensive, and the harm has already happened. And it makes me think about the Apple tags that help you locate your bags or whatever you tag to it. And when it was first created, this is a story I've heard several times, that one person sort of said, hey, perpetrators could track people using that. And they went, oh no, it's not a big issue. And then, of course, the Apple e-tags came out, and of course, perpetrators used it to cause harm, to monitor and surveil, usually women and girls, and then they had to try and retrofit a solution. I think it is about, you need to listen to lived and living experience of women and girls with disabilities, saying this is what we need to be for things to be accessible. This is what we need for things to be safe. And when that is centered, we have better products, and we
mm.
have safer products.
All right. Okay.
Yeah.
So, do you want to talk a bit about the recent legislation in Australia that restricts social
Yes,
media access for under 16s?
because this legislation has looked like it is being wound out to other places around the world as well. So in Australia, it is people under the age of 16 are not allowed onto social media platforms. I've got to say, a whole lot of people under 16 are. There's lots of ways around it, and their social media platforms are engaging with their responsibilities at different levels. But, when I was at Women with Disabilities Victoria, we have youth experts by experience, and they were really in two minds about this, because they said, yes, we experience more harm. We are more likely to be trolled. We're more likely to be bullied because we are women, because we are gender diverse, and because we are people with disabilities. And so, thus, it is a place of harm, but it also is a place where we have connection. It might be our only way of communicating with ease. It might be the only way of communicating with other people that have similar experiences with us with disability. So if you are taking away a platform because it's causing harm, you are also taking away a platform that is enabling us to communicate, find safety, and find a friendship as well. So it's a real mixed bag.
Mm.
Um, I don't know if you've
So,
had
how has this
experience
been
of.
received by disability advocates?
Yes, yes. So disability advocates, that they don't fall in one bucket or the other about whether
Mm,
they're for or against it. I think we see it as a complex issue.
mm,
And what we think we need to do more to stop the perpetrators of this bullying and this trolling, this mocking and ableism and sexism. We want them to stop. They're the ones causing the harm. So we want social media platforms to do more to stop the abuse, rather than telling people with disabilities you can't be on these platforms because they cause harm.
mm. Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So you don't have that in Nigeria. You don't have that legislation. Do you have,
No.
is there similar conversations happening about the harm, about what's happening online?
Yeah, there's a lot of conversations happening. Interestingly, the discussions, the initiatives on TFGBV initiatives in
Mm.
Nigeria is moving beyond just having awareness campaigns and just talking about
Yes.
it, but they're increasingly including digital reporting platforms, coordinating policy frameworks, right? Recently, the Lagos State Domestic and Sexual Violence Agency, what we call the DSVA, recently launched a policy on TFGBV, right, in Lagos State.
Yeah.
And usually, once Lagos State, which is a core state in Nigeria, does something,
Mm.
it's much easier for other states to, take it on. And why did they do that? Because being a response center on sexual and domestic violence, right, they had increasing cases, right, of technology facilitated GBV, including women with disabilities, right? So they started to expand on that. And beyond the state, there are other activities that are either multi-African countries, right?
Mm.
For instance, the UNFPA has a project making all spaces safe, and it's addressing technology facilitated GBV specifically. It's been implemented in Nigeria, in Kenya, in Ghana, in Benin. And one of their focus is to prevent and respond to technology facilitated GBV. Most of these activities, right, are, at the budding stage. A lot of them are new. The policy is the 2025 policy, a program that UKFCDO is funding in Nigeria, strengthening resilience and peace in northern Nigeria, is also a recent um, program being implemented, but one of its focuses is also on digital safety for women with disabilities. So, a couple of years, a year, 2 years down the line, we would be able to look and say, what's the progress being made? How is this positively impacting on women with disabilities? But yeah, it's not fully accessible to all yet. It's been unevenly implemented, but at least something is coming up. At least policies are coming up and they're intentionally looking at issues of women with disabilities, So those are good things that are coming up recently. Yeah.
That's really positive, and I think we could have had this session where we're all just talking about challenges, and we could do that for a few hours,
Hmm.
as well as I think it's important to talk about the positive things, but without losing the fact that those challenges are still really there.
Yeah.
But I really like that you have hit upon some progressive and positive progress that is happening in not only in Nigeria but other parts of Africa as well.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that, maybe we should look at what should policymakers, technology designers, service providers, what should they be prioritizing to ensure that these digital spaces are safer and more inclusive for women and girls with disabilities? You've touched on a bit of it, but yeah.
Yeah, look, I think it is about where your focus is, and
Mm.
for policymakers, for the program designers, for the owners of the products, because the program designers are building to the specification of the owners, that often have a driving a monetary focus, is that yes, make money from these products, but have access and inclusion. Do make sure your products don't do harm. And I think for policymakers, it's really important that there is strong enough regulation that deters social media platforms and the makers of technology from
Mm.
creating services that cause harm. But the other thing that we also discussed before, I think, is really important for all services, that when harm does happen, there needs to be a response to that. And women and girls with disability need somewhere where they can report when harm has happened, that it needs to be taken seriously, and they need to see that action happen. So we need those laws and policies in place. So it's more than, as you said, we need to go beyond awareness raising.
Yeah.
Awareness raising is great,
Mm.
but we have to go into action so that the online world that we deserve, that is an inclusive and accessible for all, is what exists.
Yeah, absolutely. We've said a lot. There's so much more that needs to be done, I believe. But yeah, it's interesting to note, and I think we should end on this note to ensure that policymakers, technology designers, service providers, ministries, departments, and agencies, civil society organizations, individuals, everyone has a role to play when it comes to protecting women and girls with disabilities from technology facilitated GBV, as well as providing response services to them. Thank you, Julie. I think this has been a good time. Yeah. Have
Oh,
a
thank
lovely day.
you. Wonderful chatting with you.